Well, we're here today in Washington, D.C. It's great to have my good friend Jay Bilas talking about an issue that's not really Republican or Democrat-led, but one that we think is very important when it comes to college athletes having access to their name, image, and likeness. So, Jay, I know this has been something that's been important for you for the last several years. The more you've looked into it, could you just share why that's important to you?
Well, I've been part of college sports basically since I was 17, 18 years old. Both as a player, I was on an NCAA committee when I was in college and learned the process. So I've been a policy wonk in this area for a lot of years. And in my job at ESPN, I've covered NCAA athletics for all these years. And I've learned a great deal about it, and I've always been, I guess you'd call it, an advocate for the rights of student athletes.
Sure.
Because in my judgment, an athlete is literally the only person that doesn't have the same economic rights as everyone else.
Right.
That they can't market their name, image, and likeness. They can't make any money off of their chosen field, and no other student is told that they can't do that. No other student is restricted, whether they're on scholarship or not. So I've always felt like it was a civil rights and economic rights issue. I'd never contemplated, honestly, that it would go beyond the NCAA. I think that the NCAA should do something about it and allow athletes those economic rights, but that certainly hasn't carried.
No, and that's what we're trying to do on a federal standpoint, is to encourage the NCAA to engage on an issue that's really gone on far too long. When we're talking about the NCAA, sometimes you will hear the terminology pay to play, or sometimes you'll hear out in the community, specifically the sports community, that legislation would require universities or the NCAA to pay players. In this case, that's not accurate. We're talking about the free market, allowing these student athletes to have the same access to every other American. Why do you think that's important, that these students have the same rights as all other students and all other Americans?
Well, because it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And I would argue that college sports is not amateur, even though they call it amateur. Amateur sports don't make billions of dollars, and amateur sports don't pay their coaches millions upon millions of dollars and have multi-billion-dollar television deals and have these apparel deals that are multi-million dollar per school and build these gigantic facilities. To me, it's a lot like the Olympics. Years ago, the Olympics gave up on the idea of amateurism, and so an Olympic athlete can now market their name, image, and likeness and do commercials and make money that way. And there's really no legitimate reason why a college athlete should not be allowed to do so. So I think it's kind of difficult to wrap your head around the idea that these athletes can literally be sold for billions of dollars, but if they try to earn or accept any money based upon their chosen field, athletics, then somehow they violated this principle that really doesn't exist.
It doesn't. A lot of times when people think about this issue, they think about Michael Jordan, Zion Williamson, Baker Mayfield, but really we're talking about 99.4% of these student athletes never receive a single dollar from a professional sports contract. But as a young adult, these particular restrictions strip them away from having any early earning potential, even in a field that they be pursuing outside of that. And that's something I don't hear many people talking about.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Congressman, the talk always goes to Zion Williamson or Tua Tagovailoa, players that the NCAA would say, well, that's just 1 or 2% of our student athletes. But there's so many out there, especially now in the digital age, that can be social media influencers, that can, there are revenue streams all over and there have been instances of players having YouTube channels, so like a punter from UCF, which NCAA say there's no marketability there, making money out in the marketplace. There was a Division III golfer from Williams College wrote a book about his experiences traveling the country playing golf, and he was declared ineligible. Things like that, where common sense stuff, where and it's fundamental fairness. The idea that a non-athlete student on scholarship or not that wrote a book would be celebrated for that in college, but an athlete is declared ineligible and has his or her essentially livelihood taken away from them. It's really unfortunate.
It's amazing how this issue has exploded to the forefront since California passed their legislation. Whether you like every single component of that can be debated, yet at the same time, this shows how important this issue is. And hopefully, let me ask you this, do you believe this will help motivate the NCAA to be able to come to the table to resolve this? So whether it's a federal legislation, ultimately we just want to advocate on behalf of these student athletes. Do you think this is a motivating factor this particular time frame?
I think there's a lot more motivation now to try to do something positive. I think it's going to be dragging, the NCAA is going to be dragged into the future on this. If you look back to the mid 1980s when I was in college, the NCAA used to tell every institution how often they could be on television, how often their football teams could play on television. There was a Supreme Court case, the Board of Regents case, that allowed schools and then conferences to cut their own deals. And you had NCAA administrators, athletic directors, presidents and the like saying that college sports was going to cease to exist, that it was all this doomsday rhetoric. And you look at where it is now, it's exploded in popularity. I think this will be the same, that there's a lot of, frankly, doomsday talk, a lot of slippery slope talk, a lot of unintended consequences talk, which is to me kind of nonsense.
Sure. Yeah.
But we've heard all that before, and we heard it with the Olympics years ago. People said the Olympics, oh, this is going to ruin the Olympics. It's going to ruin quote unquote amateur sports, and it's done none of that.
Yeah.
The public doesn't care. Like, the most important thing is are the athletes full-time students? For full-time students, we have no issues, because it's funny, it's okay to make money off of them, but the entire enterprise teeters on them not making any money at all. I don't believe that.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you, on behalf of Cedric Richmond, my Democratic colleague who's working with us on this, we want to say thank you for taking your time and on your dime to come to D.C. to be able to advocate that. You've been a champion for this for many, many years, and we want to applaud your great work, and hopefully we can continue to partner with you in the future.
Well, thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Thanks a lot, Jay.
Pleasure.